guys, welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now,
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, we are back with the deck that I took to my most recent locals, pure ritual Dogmatika. Well, I say pure, it's got a little bit of a Cyberse engine in, so to speak. So without wasting any more time, ladies and gents, let's get straight into the list. Now, starting us off, I'm on the Dogmatika account, and the count isn't actually that high, which is probably something that I'm gonna refine when I if I do decide to play this deck again and take it to locals, which I probably do. So starting us off, triple Ecclesia. This just goes without saying, searches all the Dogmatika cards in your deck, any card that you could imagine. Definite free of, ladies and gents, goes without saying. Next, because I'm a person that does value putting heavy damage on board, I like to end games as quickly as possible. So I've gone with the 2 Fleur de Lis, the Knighted. Now it serves a double purpose in this deck, as well as being just obviously a extender, a hand trap, so to speak, as well as some negation. It does offer levels in terms of ritual summoning, so definitely the 2 Ecclesia I value. You could actually change it out for this next one, which is Dogmatika Maximus. You could actually put Maximus at 2, but I've decided to go for the 1 Maximus just because I feel like I can get my searches off and get my plays going without necessarily going for the Maximus play. Although it's very powerful and adds another layer of obviously like utility to the deck, I just feel like the 1 Maximus is fine. I find him a little bit bricky, hence why I've played him at 1. And then for the final Dogmatika main deck monster, I've gone for Dogmatika Ashian. Now you probably could cut this for the 2nd Maximus, but I'd really value this card, ladies and gents. I don't know, I feel like having the recursion to add back from grave is something that gets missed in this deck. Because you send so much stuff to the grave, you kind of want to end games quickly, which you typically do in this deck, because it's kind of like if you get to resolve Albazoa, you kind of just KO your opponent. But I do value having a little bit of recursion, and Ashian does add to that because you get through your deck so quickly because of the consistency of the deck. Next, on to the ritual monsters. We've got 1 White Knight of Dogmatika, we have got 1 White Relic of Dogmatika, and 1 Albazoa. Obviously these cards are all powerful in their own right. White Knight is a nice interruption. It's very flexible. If your opponent activates a card or effect, you can send the card from both your deck and your opponent's extra deck to the graveyard, and then it gets the combined attack. But we all know that's just utility, ladies and gents. It just allows you to be a little bit more flexible. So typically what you're trying to look to resolve is getting White Knight on the board along with Albazoa, and then potentially going for your White Relic. I've seen a few lists that do it the other way around, but I just feel like Albazoa is such a crazy card. Being able to send like upwards of 7 cards from your opponent's extra deck or hand to the graveyard on turn 1 is just horrible. It's devastating. It reminds me of the Mech Knight field spell, where it just sends your whole extra deck to the graveyard and your opponent literally can't play, along with the utility that it does have in the graveyard as well. So a very powerful card. Albazoa is your boss monster. Now you could potentially play this at 2, but I just don't want a brick. I'm already running Maximus, Ashian, as well as Fleur de Lis, which typically can be a little bit more bricky if you don't have the correct cards to go with them. So I find that playing these at 1 is not a problem. You can still ritual summon from your graveyard, so just seeing them at 1 is not too much of a problem. But Albazoa is just insane. So it makes all your Dogmatika monsters unaffected by the activated effects of Ritual, Link, Exceeds, basically any extra deck monster. And that's very important to note, ladies and gents, the activated effects. So they don't necessarily have to be on field. They could hit the grave and have a graveyard effect. There could be an on-field effect. There could be an effect when banished. So just blanket, just negating any kind of activated effect for your Dogmatika monsters is just crazy. So it does make this deck a pseudo going 2nd deck. You could potentially just take it out to just blind go 2nd, don't care about your extra deck, and just try and go for OTKs, or just at least just like wipe a board and then try and aim to control the board from there on in. But Albazoa is definitely a power card. Next, onto the last 2 like play starters, so to speak, is double Nightmare Corruptor Ibli. Now I was considering putting in a Signet Mining just to be able to search Ibli, which I probably will do if I decide to kind of like mess with this deck a little bit, because there is a card that I do have in my side deck which I wanted to like obviously talk to you guys about, which I'm not too sure whether or not I want to put in. But playing another Signet Mining or a couple of copies of Signet Mining with the Ibli is nice. The reason Ibli is in there is because of one of the Dogmatika spells, which I'll go through over. But essentially, it gives your opponent an Ibli, which then gives your opponent a monster, which is vitally important. Along with being a Ibli lock, which is just crazy in of itself, it's also an issue for like Kashtiras, plays around Nib, even though you don't really play into Nib in this deck. It's just, the utility is just all around there. So definitely a strong card, definitely a viable option. Next, on to some hand traps. We played the Triple Ash Blossom. Yes, I've got some mismatch rarities. You know me, ladies and gents, I've got so many decks and my cards are just all over the place. So Triple Ash Blossom goes without saying. Again, another mixed rarity. Triple Nibiru the Primal Being. Now this serves twofold, ladies and gents. Obviously, let me just show you guys. Nibiru is a by all accounts a 10, and then obviously the Ibli. Where's it gone? Ibli is a 2. So you could technically use this as ritual fodder to go into some of your ritual monsters. So Nibiru isn't as dead as it is in some other decks, because you can just use it to ritual summon. But it's still a bit of a blowout. It's a check to the meta. It's becoming a little bit less weak because obviously the Kashtira players, which are typically what you're going to be seeing at your locals, are playing around Nibiru. So it's a very, very easy side out. But the moment that they stop, the moment that they notice that Nibiru is not in the format, they're going to start going for zone locks, and I need my back row zones to be free to be able to obviously resolve some of my spells and traps. So Nibiru is a bit here and there at the moment. It's just a bit of, it's teetering on the edge of meta, so definitely worth just considering whether or not you want a main deck, or even just cut it down to 2. Next, for the spells and traps, we are playing Triple Nadir Servant. This card is crazy. Yeah, the utility in this deck is just silly. Just Nadir Servant, just allowing you to add back from graveyard or even just from deck to hand. It's just, it's crazy. As well as dumping an extra deck monster, which then just provides you with so much utility. So very, very powerful. And this card, ladies and gents, is the card that just works so well with Ibli. So it's Dogmatika Matrix. So what it does is it allows you to add a Dogmatika ritual monster or ritual spell card from your deck to your hand. However, if your opponent controls a monster, then you can add another Dogmatika card from your deck to your hand. And it just says Dogmatika card. So it could be monster, it could be spell. It's silly. So actually getting a double search off this is just crazy. And this is what allows your deck to effectively go second, just because you can just search Ecclesia, you can search Albazoa as well as the ritual spell, and just straight out summon Albazoa. It's mad how it works. Definitely a powerful card. And on top of that, it's got another little bit of a broken effect where if you control like a ritual monster, you can just send an extra deck monster from the graveyard, from the deck to the graveyard from either player's extra deck, which is just it's just silly. It's just crazy how it works. So definitely you want to max out on this. This is your consistency piece. And this is why you don't necessarily need to max out on all the ritual monsters or have them any higher than 1, just because it's so searchable in this deck through Ecclesia as well as through Dogmatika Matrix. Next, we got the ritual spell. So Calamity allows you to send one from extra deck to graveyard to be able to ritual summon. It has to fulfill the full ritual cost in terms of levels of monsters. And then Dogmatika Cabre allows you to ritual summon from graveyard. So again, you can get your ritual monsters out of graveyard and just back onto the field by banishing materials. Dogmatika Macabre doesn't lock you out of the extra deck from what I've read, so you can actually just start your plays with this and still go into like Ibli lines or stuff like that. So definitely a powerful card. And then the last one out for the Dogmatika cards is the one singular punishment. I do have the second one in the side, but I decided to just go for one in the main deck just because I didn't want to brick, ladies and gents. So yeah, and that's it for most of the Dogmatika stuff. Just onto some generic stuff now, ladies and gents. We have just the one preparation of rites. Obviously, like most of the ritual monsters as well as spells are searchable, but again, I didn't want to brick on this. I'm not playing the heaviest count of the ritual spell as well as the ritual monster. So just having a one preparation of rites effectively acts as another copy of Dogmatika Matrix, depending on what situation you're in. So I just decided to go for the one, which it kind of worked out. I didn't really see it that much, but when I did, it was always live because of the count. Double Book of Moon, this is just a bit of utility and it's a bit of a check to the format. Again, a Rise Heart is a problem. If a Rise Heart is on the field, ladies and gents, it's very, very difficult to play just because you need to be able to access your graveyard or at least send stuff there. And obviously, as a macro Cosmos, it just cripples the deck. Next for a bit of utility, 1 upstart goblin just for more consistency, 1 monster reborno, because ritual monsters in effect act a lot like fusion monsters. If they're summoned correctly, then they can be brought back off monster reborn. So again, a very powerful card. It also allows you to just grab like your opponents like Fenrir's out of their graveyard, because typically they're going to have some kind of interruption in their grave. 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, again, you might have seen this in the replay. I always play one form of like main deck back row removal, just because I do really respect back row decks after playing a few myself. 1 Core by the Grave, and the double triple tactics talent. I do play the third in the side, but yeah, that's it. So that's it for the spells, and then just obviously the last 3 cards in my deck is the Infinite Impermanence. Again, mixed rarities, but it is what it is. So yeah, Imperm goes without saying, ladies and gents. Next, on to the extra deck. So for the links, I am playing 1 Dino Mundo, 1 Lingeribo, 1 Secured Gardener, as well as the 1 Salaman Great Almirage. Let me just put it under there. These all have their utility. Obviously, the Almirage into Secure Gardener is just for the Maximus play, as well as the Ibli line, so definitely powerful. Again, Lingeribo is there for the Ibli, as well as just being able to play around with cards like Infinite Impermanence, because if you go in second, you can typically go into a Lingeribo, and your opponent does set some kind of back row. Back row is very prevalent nowadays, ladies and gents, especially with Branded in the format, with Labyrinth in the format. Believe it or not, Branded is kind of like a combo deck that kind of sets a couple of back rows. So you could actively call it a mid-range, but it's like mid-range aggro, because the monsters they put on the board is just so big. But they do tend to have like 1, maybe 2 traps that they might potentially set, whether that be Imperm or Branded Banishment or stuff like that. So having a Lingeribo is very good. Almirage, this can just, yeah, you can also normal summon an Ash Blossom and go to Almirage if need be. Dino Mundo is nice. It can revive a ritual monster. It does take a ritual monster to summon, so you seldom go into this, but it's nice to have a little bit of utility. Then on to the synchros. I've decided to max out on the Herald of the Arclight. Oops, not that one, it's a bit too early. Max out on the Herald of the Arclight, ladies and gents. Just for more consistency. You could cut this down to 2 because there's ways to recycle it, most notably with this card. Deep Sea Prima Donna. When this card's sent to the graveyard, you can put a banished card back from the banished zone into the graveyard. So again, it can trigger Entis, it can trigger Herald of the Arclight. So you could potentially get away with playing 2, but because I haven't tested this deck, I just went for 3, just because I was just blowing through like Nadir Servants and resolving like your Dogmatika Matrix or your White Relic of Dogmatika. Just helps basically. Also, 1 Cyframe Lord Omega, along with the 1 Wind Pegasus Agnista. This is just graveyard utility. This can be shuffled back. Deep Sea Prima Donna can put Wind Pegasus back into the graveyard after it's banished, and it shuffles a card into the deck. So you could actually trigger this twice, and then you could Cyframe Lord Omega, put Deep Sea Prima Donna back into your extra deck along with itself. So there's a nice little bit of synergy between these two, and I understand why Omega's limited. It's actually busted. 1 Cosmic Blazar Dragon. You could potentially have the, I believe it's the 5-headed Twin Dragon or Link Dragon. I just decided to go for this because I couldn't find my other one. Ideally, you want the 5-headed dragon because it's got 5,000 attack. Cosmic Blazar's got 4,000, so it allows your Dogmatika punishment to be live still. But yeah, normally you're using it as ritual food anyway. Next, we have the double Titanic Lad. Obviously, we're playing Dogmatika, so we want to resolve Titanic Lad. And then finally, we have the triple outer entity Entis. I use this card to just nuke back row. It's just crazy. Just like send Entis pop, send Entis pop. It's like, it's crazy. It's all I spent time just pow, just plowing through my opponent's field. So really powerful card. Really do like it. And that is it for the extra deck, ladies and gents. Now, before I go, I wanted to show you this card. Dogmatika Calamity. Oh, sorry, Dogmatika Turgy. So I did have this card in the deck. Now, the reason I had it in is just because of, like I said, I do really value like graveyard recursion. But this card allows you to ritual summon a Dogmatika monster from your deck, as well as your hand. And you can actually do this on your opponent's turn, obviously with it being a trap. And then when it's in the graveyard, you can banish this card to add back a Dogmatika monster from your graveyard and then put one into the deck with a different level, I believe. So it's a bit of recursion, but because I felt like my monster count was a little bit too low to be able to resolve this, because you do need to use Dogmatika monsters to be able to ritual summon, or use fusion, synchro, or ritual monsters on field. I didn't want to brick on it because I wasn't going to guarantee that I'd have those monster types on field. In fact, I very rarely summon out of the extra deck, to be honest. So it is a card that you could potentially tech into your deck, but you want to get it into the graveyard. And if I do decide to put the Silent Mining in, ladies and gents, I'll probably put one copy of this card in, just because I'll be able to discard it off Silent Mining, for example, and get it into the graveyard, because the graveyard effect is effectively what I'm looking for, just because it allows for a little bit of recursion. So, but yeah, that is what it is. But anyway, what do you think, ladies and gents? This is only my first iteration of the deck. There's a lot more refinement that could go into this, and I could potentially look to change a few things around. But like I said, I've only tested it once and took it to that locals like I showed you guys. So hopefully if I take it to another locals, I'll have a little bit of refinement on it. But anyway, we find ourselves at the end of another video. As always, if you do enjoy this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff, and I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.